All right, Rahul. Thank you for joining today. So we are going to have a quick mock interview. Um, the role what I'm referring is more on Azure Active Directory. So they the team is looking for Azure Identity and Access Management Engineer. So we say IAM engineer. So who can help our day-to-day operations in the enterprise cloud environment? And so what we are looking is, the candidate who has experience on on-premises AD or infrastructure and, manage the core identity part at the same time. And the user who has experience on, or candidate who has experience on Azure AD and Azure AD operations and assisted the large enterprise environment. So I'm hoping based on your profile, this is more suitable for your skills and our requirement. So let's get started. We will start with your introduction. I try to understand your roles and responsibilities and your skills and experience, what you have in the previous organizations or previous projects, and what you are doing currently. Right. So we'll try to start
Mhm.
with the introduction, and later we'll try to understand a little bit of your technical expertise and the process you follow, and we'll see how you can be helpful to us. Okay, so please
Yes,
start with
Kamal.
your uh, introduction. Just talk about your experience and skills that you have so far.
Yes, Kamal. Okay, yeah. Thank you for connecting, Kamal. So, uh, about my overall experience in IT, I would say it's around 9 years and 10 months of experience, which I hold in IT industry. So out of this experience, around 4+ years of experience I hold into Azure. And apart from that, the rest of the years are I have worked as a network engineer and also as a desktop engineer, support engineer. So this is my overall IT experience. And the previous organization where I have worked for was Apicero. So I have worked with them for around 1 year and 8 months. So there I have worked as a senior cloud engineer. So I used to take care of various activities on Azure platform, like user creation, creating groups on Active Directory, assigning roles to the users, and providing access to users. And apart from this, I used to also work with the build team, and I used to create virtual machines, create virtual machine backups, restoring the backup. And apart from this, virtual machine troubleshooting and virtual machine scaling up and down. I'm like increasing the disk size or maybe some other parts related to it. So I have done all these things uh, on Azure. And apart from this, I have took care of some of the storage and backup activities as well on the production environment and as well as on test environment on both the sides. So I used to take backup, restore it whenever required. And I used to also connect it with the storage accounts as well, maintaining the storage accounts. So I have done all these activities during my previous work experience with Apicero. And before joining Epicero, I used to work for Cons- Concentric Solutions. So there I used to work on Active Directory mostly in the initial days when I have joined them. So I have joined as support engineer. So where I used to work with one of my senior, I used to help him in Azure Active Directory uh, roles and responsibilities. I mean, like for these basic things which come under IAM, like creating the users, providing them access, and if some of the user has left the organization, removing them from the system, and also providing the users license to Office 365 so that they can access the cloud mail exchange server. So these are some of the basic things which I used to do there when I have joined. Later on, after 1.5 year I'm like after spending 1.5 year in that previous organization, so they have moved from on-premise to cloud environment. So at that time, I got an opportunity to start working with them on the Azure cloud environment. So again, after we moved from the on-premise environment to the cloud environment, I have witnessed the migration process. I was involved in the migration process. I have also worked with them on the migration process, done some of the troubleshooting in the migration process. When we have faced issues for we have faced in the initial days sync issues where all the users data was not getting synced. So these are some of the basic things which I have learned there. And I have also learned the troubleshooting steps with the seniors there. So I got more exposure on cloud in that previous organization itself. And so this is my overall experience on Azure cloud environment and Office 365 support.
Okay, thank you so much, Rahul. So, based on your explanation, it looks like your profile is very strong, and more of an identity and access management and cloud support engineer, cloud operations engineer role. So, one thing I missed is like, what are you doing currently? So, you talked about your previous organizations, right? What are you currently doing it?
So here actually we are a team of around like 15 people. So we work together. We get requests by either by emails or by the ticketing tool which we have. So we get a request on emails or by ticket. So we look at the requests, and whatever the request is from the user, like for example, either to create a new virtual machine, or maybe if they are if they are facing any issues related to the virtual machine, if they are not able to connect to the virtual machine, or if they are able to connect but it's not allowing them, I'm like it's not booting up properly. So these kind of issues, we troubleshoot them, and we help the users with them. And apart from that, if some of the development team, if they are trying to uh, upload any of the new code on the virtual machine servers where they publish the code, so if they have faced any issues after publishing the code, and if they want to roll back whatever changes they have done, so then we restore the virtual machine, backup whatever we have took, we restore it, and we try to bring up the system to the previous date, which when it was working fine. So this is what we generally do on our day-to-day activities. And apart from this, the tickets which we are working upon, so like for example, suppose if I am working in the early morning shift, and the second person joins in the afternoon shift, so whatever tickets I am holding, which I was working upon and which are in progress, then I add all my comments in the ticket. Then I have a connect with the second person who is going to join in the second shift. Then I explain everything to that second person, that okay, for in this ticket I have done all these things, and these are some of the things which are still pending that needs to be taken care of. So in this way, I explain him about each ticket, what I have done and what is remaining, and I assign those tickets to him. And after this is done, I send an email across the team that okay, these are the tickets which I have took in the first shift, and I have worked upon this till this step. And from here onwards, the second person is going to take care of it. I have discussed with the person and explain him whatever is remaining, so that he can start taking care of the remaining things. So this is all about my daily activities that I do and work upon.
Great, great. I'm glad to hear that. You have a very good experience into this operations part. Okay, so let's get started with the little bit of technical part, right? Just to understand your level of expertise on this Azure Active Directory. So, okay, can you tell me what is the difference between Active Directory and Azure Active Directory?
Okay. So the first major thing that I could see is that we can provide a single sign-on on the Azure Active Directory, where it was not possible on the Windows Active Directory.
Yeah,
And
so just want to let you know. See, if you're not sure, just let me know that I'm not 100% sure, but I can give my, and I can try to think of it
okay,
and give you some explanation. Okay, because
okay,
I don't want you. Your profile so far is really good. Okay, I don't want
okay,
you just give me some random information, right? Which you are not clearly aware of it, right?
okay,
Yeah, you just let me
right,
know if you know things. That's fine. It's not like
mhm,
not everybody knows everything, right? Though you have been
right,
working on it, you may not be able to explain in a better way, right? It's quite common. So that's
right,
okay. That's okay. If you don't know, just let me know that I'm not 100% sure the
mhm,
definition part, but in AD I used to do this way, and Azure AD I'm doing this way. But I really don't know. I'm not able to differentiate. Right? It's end of the day. Yes, we understand the technical part that whether you have good understanding or not, and at the same
mhm,
time whether you are doing it or not, whether you're really performing the operations or not. So later we'll see, there is a gap, like, you're failed to explain where exactly you're finding difficult. We'll try to identify and try to fix or mitigate it. Okay. Okay. So AD and Azure AD differentiations, right? Just to get answer from you, right? I'm just trying to help you. Okay.
mhm, right, right. Okay.
So basically in AD, what you used to do, you used to log into the server, correct? And you used to open the Active Directory use and computers and create the user accounts, correct? And
Mhm,
groups, and later providing access to the files or folders, uh, based on the group or a user. That's what you used to do.
use.
Sometimes you used to create a service principal account, or SPNs, we say, right? Service accounts. We used to create an on-prem ID, right? And when you give this, right, the authentication happens through Kerberos and some other protocols, right? LDAP,
Mhm,
Kerberos, and you used to have a group policies and such kind of features in the on-premises Active Directory. Okay,
Active Directory.
and
Yes.
as a company, you have to manage the domain controller which hold the, or a server which holds this Active Directory domain services, right? So you are also responsible for it, the entire server infrastructure, or probably the server where you have this AD and components installed, and you are responsible for managing the authentication system in the backend and the servers. So when it comes to the Azure AD, so you don't take care of creating any provisioning any servers. You don't create any server and configure the ADDS or Active Directory domain services. You don't manage the replication part. You don't manage the security of the physical server and a virtual machine which hold this ADDS, right? Because it's a PaaS service offered by Microsoft in Azure AD, right? You don't take care of it. The another difference is, in Azure AD it doesn't support the Kerberos and group policies. If you need to enable them, you have to implement the Azure AD domain services. There's another feature. Okay, this is like the major difference between AD and Azure AD is you don't maintain the infrastructure. That's the first thing. Okay,
Mm,
and the second thing is it doesn't support the Kerberos and Azure AD. Okay, now Microsoft enhancing the platform. Okay, they're trying to introduce these features, but it is not fully functional at the moment, right? If you want to utilize them, you have to introduce the new services in the Azure AD, like I mentioned, Azure AD domain services and all. Okay, that's the difference. Okay, clear?
mhm, mhm.
Okay, so tell me, what are the ways to create a user account in the Azure AD?
Okay. So the first is that we create a user account directly by adding the details of the user. And the second way is by inviting a guest user I mean, it's by sending them a request so that they get a link of invitation on their email. They open the link and then they acknowledge it, and then the account has been created in the Azure Active Directory. So, and apart from this, we can also create bulk users by adding them into an Excel sheet and then uploading the Excel sheet, and then we can create bulk users at the same time. So these are the three methods of creating the users that I do remember.
Okay, what are the type of user accounts you have in Azure AD?
Okay, so the first one is the Azure Active Directory, I mean like the cloud user,
Good. Go ahead.
and the on-premise user, and the hybrid environment user. Um, we have also guest users and mm, business user account as well.
Okay,
So
so you have
these are the
B2B
some.
users and you have the, I mean, you also call guest users, and we sync users from on-prem AD to Azure AD, and we can create user accounts in the cloud itself. Correct? That's good.
Yes,
That's
yes.
what even I was expecting. So if I create a user account in Office 365, will it
Mhm.
show up in Azure AD? Okay. If I create a
Yes,
user account in Azure AD, will it show up in Office 365?
Office 365. Yes, it will.
How and why?
Okay, if we see that if both of the you I'm like on both the sides, if it's under the same subscription, then we can see that the Active Directory is getting synced and the user accounts which are
Yeah,
created
so
on the Active
basically
Directory.
Office 365 subscription is different and Azure subscription is different. So what subscription are you referring here?
Okay,
You are
the
in the right
subscription,
direction. You are on the right
yeah,
direction. Just go ahead.
uh,
Just be
yes,
confident. That's all.
I'm mentioning the subscription which we are using for the
Yeah.
Active Directory domain controller. I'm like the primary account that we are using. We have all our
Okay.
users
So I don't
created.
want you to just go into wrong direction. I'm gonna say Azure AD. When Azure AD, when you subscribe for the Azure subscription, right? You get
Mhm.
Azure AD, right?
Right.
And using the same Azure AD tenant, if you subscribe for the Office 365, definitely whoever the users part of Azure AD will be showing up in Office 365. And if you create another Azure subscription also on the same Azure
Mhm.
AD, right? The users will be visible in the Azure subscription, which means end of the day, if we are using the same Azure AD to subscribe or to add any subscription, be it Office 365 subscription, be it Azure subscription, if the
Mhm.
backend, if it is using the same Azure AD tenant or Azure Active Directory, the users will be visible. Okay, so these are very
Okay.
basic. I just want to ensure that you are also clear with the very basic questions. Okay,
Mhm.
we
Mhm.
learn a lot. We try to explain very technical, but basic things we forget, right? So it's very
Mhm.
it's fundamental thing. Okay,
Okay.
so that's good. Thank you. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so what are the different roles you have on Azure AD?
We have roles like owner, contributor, and reader. So these are the three roles that we have on Azure AD.
Azure Active Directory I'm referring. I am not referring the Azure subscription. Azure AD have rules: user administrator, global administrator, password administrators, application administrator. Do you remember? Azure AD
Uh-huh.
permissions are different from the Azure subscription permissions. Don't
Mm,
combine Azure AD and Azure subscription. I clearly mentioned the role which we are looking for is specific to the Azure AD. Okay, so you can take this as an example, right? So I'm stressing
mhm.
Azure AD. So everything related to Azure AD, you may have to think of it. Azure AD permissions are different from Azure subscription permissions. I'm sure you are aware of that, right?
Yes. So
Ah,
in
yeah,
Azure AD also, if I recall, I'm like there are many different roles under Azure AD.
correct.
So some of them which I do remember are like application administrator, application developer.
Correct. So they all are the Azure
Uh,
AD permissions, correct? Those are the roles,
yes,
correct? But
right.
what you were trying to explain me is owner, reader, contributor. That is not
That
part of
is
the Azure
under
AD.
subscription. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So
Okay.
with these roles, right? Let's say global administrator and Azure AD, right? What you
Hmm.
can do? What operations can you can do it?
So we can assign these roles to the users and assign them a specific role so that they can perform the task related to those roles. So this can be done here so that we don't need to assign all the roles to all the users. So we can assign them specific roles and then they can take care of those activities related to those roles.
Okay, let me ask you this question too, right? If I assign Azure AD permission to one user, can he
Mm,
create a resource in Azure subscription? If he is a Azure AD global administrator, can this user create resources in the Azure subscription? Can he even see the Azure subscription? Rahul, don't get
no,
confused. You are in the
I
right direction, okay? You are in the right direction. I'm trying to help you, okay? You know the
okay.
answers, but you are just confused, okay?
If he's a global admin in the Active Directory, then
Azure Active
yes, he
Directory.
can. Yes, he can see the subscription. But I don't think that he can assign any subscription related role to some other users
Mhm. Okay,
unless he is an owner.
okay, that's good. So, yeah, one thing you answered, but uh, just want to clear again. Azure AD permissions are different and Azure subscription permissions are different, right? If you are Azure AD global administrator, you can manage the Azure AD only.
Only. Okay.
You right? So if you don't have, as long
Mm-hmm.
as right, you don't have any access to Azure subscription, either a
Mm-hmm.
reader, contributor, owner, any service specific role or custom roles, right? If your
Mm-hmm.
account is not added to any subscription, Azure subscription with any kind of role on Azure, right? Azure
Mm-hmm.
subscription rules, you can't even see, though you are a global admin on Azure
Mm-hmm.
AD, if you if your account is not added to Azure subscriptions any of the levels, right? You can't do
Okay.
anything over there. You can't even see the subscription, right?
O-
Got it?
Okay.
So
Yes.
that is the thing you have to remember always. Azure AD permissions are different and Azure subscription permissions are different.
Permissions are
See,
different.
listen, right? You are a user on Azure AD, just a user, right? You don't
Mm-hmm.
have any permissions on Azure AD. But if your account is added to subscription as a owner, right? You can manage anything in Azure subscription. Though you are a user in Azure AD, but in subscription you are a owner, right? There's a difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
Though you are a global admin on Azure AD, and if you are a reader in Azure subscription, you can't do anything in Azure subscription. So what I'm trying to
Correct.
say, Azure AD permissions are limited to the managing of Azure Active Directory. Like you see in on-premise Active Directory, you have a domain admin, enterprise admin kind of roles, right? Where they can manage only Active Directory related information, right? They cannot manage the VMware console. For to manage the VMware console or vSphere console and all vSphere resources, you need to be part of a VMware. VMware has certain permissions, so that's a virtualization platform. Here is a cloud platform. So in the cloud platform, Azure subscription is same as your VMware subscription. Example, right? So where you manage the permissions to create resources, manage resources on Azure subscription level. Okay, they're in VMware subscription. So core identity permissions are different and Azure subscription permissions are different. You have to be very clear. Okay, got
Mm.
it?
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the next thing is uh, what are the other capabilities of Azure AD? What Azure AD can give you? Now we
We
introduce
can.
Azure AD example. Okay, example. You have Azure AD and you created a user
Mm-hmm.
account, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what user can do next? Can you give me one example? Why you have to create a user account in Azure AD? What is the purpose of creating a user account in Azure AD?
So that we can allow users to access the resources that are created on Azure Cloud,
Azure Cloud means Azure subscription.
uh, Azure Active Directory, the users
Okay.
that we create on Azure Active Directory,
Mhm.
and the resources that are created on, yes, yeah, sorry. sorry, my bad. Yes, the resources that are created under the Azure subscription. So we can provide access to the users to access those resources,
Okay,
resources like
that's fine.
virtual
That's fine.
machine
That's
and
fine.
other.
I'm again saying this is stick to the Azure AD platform. Okay. Yes, you create a user account and you provide access to the Azure subscription so that they will manage the Azure resources. Let's say you are hiring a cloud engineer and you create a user account with either an on-prem AD or Azure AD. Okay. Then later what they do, you will be giving access to Azure subscription so that cloud engineer can help in day-to-day operations in the Azure subscription. But what I'm saying, I'm specifically talking about the Azure AD. Okay, so if you give access to, if you create a user account in Azure AD, okay, and what that user can do on Azure AD, or probably what is the purpose of adding the user account in the Azure AD? You may say the user can
Mhm,
access to enterprise applications, correct? So whatever the applications are integrated or associated with your Azure AD, the user can access them. That's the reason you are creating user account in Azure AD, correct? So you have,
mhm,
let's say, workday application, you have the some business application, let's say CRM related applications that are with the Azure AD, where you configure the single sign-on and all, right? If the user
mhm,
need to access those applications, you are going to add them to the Azure AD. Once you are user account created in Azure AD, then you will be giving access to the applications, correct? That's one of the use
mhm.
case you can explain. And other use case,
Okay.
if I create a user account in Azure AD, the user account can be visible in Office 365. And if I give Office 365 license to the user can start accessing the of Microsoft Outlook and Microsoft Teams, Microsoft SharePoint, and everything, right? See, end of the
Mhm,
day, you know, so you just need to relate with your on-prem AD experience. When a new user joins your organization, you're creating user account for him, and later he get access to multiple applications, multiple share folders. Here, multiple applications are nothing but enterprise applications that are integrated with Azure AD, where you configure SSO and all, right? The user
mhm.
created and they got access, and later when the user is trying to access the application, Azure AD is going to authenticate, correct? And he get access to Office products and all, right? That's one of the use cases why you create user accounts in Azure AD.
Oh, no, Juridi.
One use case to
Mhm,
provide access to subscription, the other use case to provide access to Office products, the other use case to provide access to the enterprise applications, correct?
okay.
And uh, okay, that's in. So did you ever integrate any application with Azure AD?
Yes, I have integrated an application with Azure AD. So when we have launched the human resource new website, so we needed to integrate it with the Azure AD so that all the users in the organization can access it. Yes, I have done that part.
What are the steps you followed?
Mm, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just try to explain, what is a enterprise application, how you integrated. You just explained about HR based application, you integrated, right?
Mm-hmm.
What steps you
Right.
followed?
So I have logged into the Active Directory, and there we have an option as enterprise applications. So we go into enterprise applications. We select an option as a new application. Then
Okay.
a new panel will open.
There you specify the
We
details
specify
about
the
your HR
details of the
application
application.
and integrate. Okay. So what is
Integrate. Yes.
SSO? What does SSO means? What are the
Uh,
different SSO options you have?
SSO is a single sign-on option, which we provide to the users to log in into all our enterprise applications that are on Azure Active Directory. So I'm like with the same single user credentials, they can log in into all our applications. So this is single sign-on feature that we have under Azure Active Directory.
Okay. What are the different SSO options you have? SSO with the Azure AD credentials, SSO with the Like, did you ever configure the Azure AD Connect?
Azure AD Connect.
Yeah. Okay. How your on-premises users are synchronized to Azure AD?
Okay, so while we try to connect it, we in the on-premise Active Directory virtual machine, we download an AD sync application, and then we configure it with the details of our Azure Active Directory, and then we also go ahead and configure it. And then after configuration, we verify the domain, and once the domain has been verified on our Azure cloud environment, and then after that we say configure. So I'm like the
Okay. So
configuration
while
process.
configuring this as Azure AD Connect, you see an option called SSO, right?
Mm-hmm.
How your users need to log in. Example, how they need to log in. Example, let's say how you ensure your users log in. What credential they have to use. Is it Azure already going to store the credentials, or you are asking them to redirect the application to the on-prem AD and get the token, or do you use the ADFS kind of federation services, ping federate? You see a couple of options while configuring the Azure AD Connect. Do you
Right,
remember?
right. We do see, yes. So we generally go with the password synchronization, so that whatever password the user was using on their on-premise environment, they can use the same on the Azure cloud to access the cloud applications.
Okay, okay, that's fine. So what is the MFA? Did you ever configure MFA for your cloud
Uh,
users?
yes, yes. MFA is multi-factor authentication. So with this, we provide an extra layer of protection to the user authentication method, so that we can validate the user whoever is logging into our system or to the cloud environment. So in MFA, we can provide the access to the users. I'm like we can enable MFA feature to the user, and the user will be prompted to select the options either they can go for an OTP with their mobile
Okay,
number.
that's fine. That's
or
fine. Thank you.
Mhm.
Um, you are in the right direction. So, did you ever implemented the um, Azure privileged identity management?
Yes, I have implemented the Azure privileged identity. So we can provide a specific role to the users. I'm like we can assign that roles to the users, and a user can enable it whenever they want to act. I'm like they want to perform an action related to that specific roles
Okay,
which are
so is it
assigned
like
to them.
available with the Azure AD by default, or do you need to
No, no,
buy
we
anything?
need to enable that role for that user. I'm like it will be
No,
assigned to
no.
that user.
Can we use this feature with the Azure AD free tier, or do you need to buy any
Uh,
licenses?
no, we need an P2 enterprise license for that to provide that feature.
Okay, okay, that's good. So, what is the role-based access control?
Sorry, server-based access control?
Role-based access, not
Role-based
like.
access control. Okay, so sorry. Okay, in a role-based access control, we can assign a specific role to the user so that they can perform a specific task related to that role. So, like for example, if we have a user from an department like a finance department or an IT department, and if we want to assign the reader access to that user so that they can have access to the resources that are under that IT department or finance department. So we can go to that resource group, we can go to an option as IAM under that, and then we can assign the roles to that user as a reader. I'm like, this is
Okay,
just an example.
yeah,
We
so that's fine. So maybe you have to change your examples.
Okay. Okay.
That's fine, totally fine, but I prefer you change the example, okay?
Okay.
Um, yeah, because finance and accounting, they may not access to the Azure resources, right?
Mm-hmm.
Only cloud engineers or project managers might have to have access, application team might have to access. Okay,
Okay.
just change
Okay.
that example. That should be
Mm-hmm.
fine. That's totally
Okay.
fine. Okay,
Right.
I understood you have some knowledge about it. Okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
totally fine. Um, so another question I have, let's say one of the user is not able to log into one of the application which is part of your Azure AD. So he raise a ticket to you and say, hey, I'm not able to access this application. What do you do?
Mm, okay, so we try to see how he is trying to connect it to that application. I'm like, is it from any of his private, I'm like home internet or something, or if it's on our Azure cloud environment, then we need to see whether if he is trying to connect it through our VPN.
See, this is
So,
nothing to related to your infrastructure. It's a SaaS-based application, right? When I say
mm,
integrated with Azure AD, it's a SaaS-based application. Okay, so you don't have any integration with your infrastructure, VPN, network, something. It's a SaaS-based application. It's a um, Workday application, which is integrated with your Azure AD. In the Workday, what he do, he just log in, he just update his profile
profile.
information, yeah, kind of thing.
Hmm.
So he's not able to access now. So you may have to ask what is the error he's receiving. Okay. Is it like
Okay.
website is not accessible, application is not accessible, is getting a unauthorized error, probably token issues. What exactly is getting an error? Okay. Then probably
Okay.
you might say, okay, what is the user is trying to log in through? Okay, the username. Go ahead and check in the Azure AD whether user account is exist or not. Yes, if it is exist, and see if the user is added to the application or not. Okay, that's what you have to
Okay.
say. Then if it,
Okay.
what kind of authentication it is configured? Is it configured as SAML based authentication, like SSO, right? So if it is configured, so is it not? Is it configured properly or not? So basic troubleshooting you might have to start with this. Okay,
Hmm.
yeah. So that's about it.
Okay.
So do you know what is SAML authentication? SAML? That's fine.
Yes, I
If
do,
you don't
but
know,
I
you
don't remember the full format though.
no full form. So what is it? Where do we use the SAML authentication? Do you know author as well?
Oh, so while authenticating the user when he tries to log in into the system, so these are the authentication methods that are used to
Okay.
authenticate an user.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And so how do you ensure, like, let's say if user is trying to log in from one specific two locations, so one user cannot be part of two locations at the same time, correct? How do you get
Uh,
such
ye-
kind of fraud alerts on Azure AD? Do you know how to audit them on Azure AD? Do you know, is there a way to restrict such kind of activities? Let's say if your system identified that user is accessing from two different location, can you block access? Do you know conditional access on Azure AD?
Okay, okay, no, I don't recall it.
Okay, that's okay, no problem. Do you know what is a risky sign-in? That's fine. So
No.
if you want, will you be able to check sign-in information about a specific user? So each user will have a
Yes, I
sign-in
do
logs,
think
right?
that we do have logs for each specific user,
Okay.
that when they have last tried to log in, and what all things they have tried to access on the cloud environment. So I think we have a logs for that, and we can
Okay.
fetch those logs and look into that.
So what is the difference between app registration and enterprise applications? What is a managed entity? So do you know what is service principal name, like SPN, where it is used?
Mm,
Okay. Mm. So how many users requests you get on a daily basis?
the tickets and all.
User account creation. So I'm specifically talking about Azure AD because we don't want you to
Okay,
manage the infrastructure, okay? Only
right.
manage the
Okay.
Azure AD. Yeah.
So on an average, we get around 20 tickets in a day related to the either maybe some of them are related to user creation, some of them are related to their access issues. So on an average, we can say 20 tickets a day.
So what if the user forget his password? What options
So
he
if
has?
yes, we do have an option either we as an admin can reset the password, or maybe we can provide an option for the self password reset, uh, so that the user can reset the password on their own if they have forgot the password or if the password is incorrect.
Okay, got it. All right, so I think I'm done with my uh, interview asking too many questions. I was trying to help you wherever is possible. Yeah,
Mhm.
so I will try to give you my feedback here. Maybe you can start improving yourself. Okay.
Yes,
See,
Kamal. Yeah.
based on my understanding, so, so your day-to-day responsibilities explanation was really good. Okay.
Okay.
It was really good.
Uh-huh.
So when it comes to the deep technical stuff, right? I didn't even ask
Mm-hmm.
you about the process and collaboration. I thought of asking, right? So I didn't go through it, but probably you might be doing better over there. When it comes to the
Okay.
technical part, I'm seeing you're very poor in technical.
Hmm.
So out of 10, if you ask me, I'll give you 3, 4 maximum, right?
Okay.
So you need to improve. It's not a big
Mm-hmm.
deal to you, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you know what is what. If I
Mm-hmm.
ask you what is MFA, you are going to talk about it. If I ask you
Okay.
what is Azure AD, you are going to talk about it. If I ask you what is enterprise application, you're going to talk about it. But if I go a little deeper into it, you're failing to explain, right? So
Mm-hmm.
how you can avoid this is you just need to practice more. You are good in
Okay.
creating a story, you're good in explaining things, so a little bit of practice you are lacking. If you are able to practice it, all these use cases, integrating an enterprise application and looking at the SSO options and what is the SAML and all those things, right? And integrating on-prem AD to Azure AD, what are options we have it. Just see, everybody can talk about, right? Installing Azure AD, step one, step two, step three. But what is the purpose of it? You need to, as experienced person, you are going to talk, not just talking about what you see in the documentation, right? You're going to share your experience and intention behind introducing the tool, correct? You have to
Mm-hmm.
just think about it at a high level and try to explain it. Even the one thing I
Okay.
noticed it, if I ask anything, you're able to answer it. You're able to answer at a overview level, right? But if I
Mm-hmm.
try to ask any further question, little bit of next level, you are not able to answer.
Mm-hmm.
And these are like L1 role questions what I asked. But
Okay.
you just need a little bit of practice. Just get a one Office 365 subscription. You can get a free trial and explore what options you have, users, groups, products, and what are the admin console contains. If you're Office 365 admin, what are the L1 roles you can do, creating user, assigning licenses, and go to Azure AD and create users, assigning licenses. See what properties the user has, right? What is
Mm-hmm.
privilege anti-management? What is anti-protection? What is sign-in logs? What are the audit logs? Right? See, in Azure AD,
Mm-hmm.
what you do is you just maintain the security of your environment, right? If that is broken, everything is broken, right? Because that is a entry layer. Everybody log in, right? You get a user account, you get a privileged access, then you log in, you manage things. Just try to explore each and every option on Azure AD. nothing to learn anything beyond it. Go to Azure AD, see what
Mm-hmm.
options you have. It's users, okay, which means you can create user accounts in Azure AD. You see groups, which means you can create a groups on Azure AD. You see applications, which means you can add applications. Now the question is, what kind of users I can create, what kind of groups I can create, what kind of applications I can integrate. Okay, that's where you have to thought, you have to think about it, right? So if it is a server infrastructure, you create a server and you install IaaS and you push your code to the IaaS and configure the IaaS application, ensure that it's accessible over the internet. But here in it, when it comes to Azure AD, it's a SaaS-based product. Somebody already developed this application, somewhere they are managing it. You are using Azure AD as an identity provider for your email ID or your user account. So when you log into enterprise application at say Workday, you enter your user ID. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
Rahul at vvhitsolutions.com. The application knows after whatever it sees after at the rate, right? That is the identity, which is vvhitsolutions.com. It knows, okay, this user is belongs to vvhitsolutions.com. Then it goes to vvhitsolutions directory and
Mm-hmm.
it checks whether user account exists or not. It will ask Azure AD, and if it is exist, it Azure AD will give the token to the application. Application will authenticate. Just at a high level, just think of it at high level, right? So here
Mm-hmm.
you're not managing any infrastructure. Somebody else developed, they added their application into Azure AD gallery, and you're just integrating into your company so that your users in your company can access this. So with this approach, your user don't need to have another separate user account with their Workday, and on a separate user account with some other applications. You might have hundred of applications in your organization where user one need to access. So if you don't integrate those applications with Azure AD, user one need to have 100 user accounts, right? With this approach, one single user ID password, he is using to connect to multiple applications. That is the purpose why we integrate enterprise application with the Azure Active Directory, right? So you need to understand the concept, why we do this, right? What is this and why we do this, how we do it, right? If you know these things, that should be fine. I think little bit of efforts will give you some good understanding about Azure AD. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
this role what your customer is looking for is specific to Azure AD. Just focus on this and focus on Azure identity protection, and what how you monitor the security part, and how you identify if there is a threat, right? How do you create conditional access policies, how you can implement it, and those kind of things, and a little bit of Office 365. Not don't go in depth of Office 365. Focus on Azure AD, just Azure AD.
Mm-hmm.
That should be fair enough. If you put
Okay.
efforts today, I think um, little bit of practice, tomorrow you will do better for sure. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
All right, thank you so much, Rahul. um,
Yeah.
Thanks for your
Thank you,
time.
Kamal. Sure. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. So we'll see you in the next video. Probably
Mm-hmm.
I'll take another interview for you. Just take
Yes.
1 week of time. Okay. Prepare
Mm-hmm.
well in between. If you have any question, do reach out to me. I will try to help you. So our end goal is to ensure that you project what you know, right? If I
Yes,
ask you
Kamal.
to
Yeah.
create users, create a large infrastructure, you do it, but you're failing to explain because you know things, but you're lacking of practice, right? More practice might
Mm-hmm.
give you. So probably in the next batches or next set of sessions, I'm going to create an environment, a real IT environment where users can actually, the candidates can just work as a real-time employees. So I'll try to add you to that batch as well, so you get some more confidence. Okay.
Yes,
Thank
Kamal.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you
Okay.
so
Yeah.
much,
Sure,
Rahul.
Kamal. Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.